The Answer.
So going down to that big square building is kind of like Raiders of the Lost Ark. So, it's interesting. Is it a battle royal down there, or do people actually converse with one another and make things happen? I think both is correct. Beth Fukumoto is here as we converse every Monday morning about what's happening in that big square building from the minority standpoint. We already know what happens in the majority standpoint, right? Because it's headlines every day of what they're doing. Pretty interesting, though. I do know that this is a year that is sort of in between. Everybody's going to be building up and posturing for the national presidential election next year.
Yeah.
And what's coming up here pretty soon is the Republican convention. And as a Republican, what do you anticipate, or what are some of the goals that you'd like to see as far as turnout and how people can get more involved, or at least take a look and see if they want to?
I think as far as turnout, it would be nice to at least reach, a decent. I think maybe even if we reach 100, it'd be nice. I'd like to see us get to 200. But
when you say 200, you're talking about delegates.
Delegates, yeah. Right? I think we haven't given a lot of people good reason to come out this year yet, and I'm hoping that there will be a little bit more reason. I think anytime you have a contested chair election for chair, you get more people out, and right now it doesn't seem like it's going to be contested. And just, I think from my perspective, things are always better when they're contested. I think that's true in regular elections.
I actually agree, and let's be frank about it. There is a faction of the Republican Party that is sort of split off and is calling themselves the Republican Assembly. I would think that if they really are serious, that they'd have a viable person to run.
Right.
And so they must be guessing that they don't have enough strength to run.
Right. And, if ever it was their year, I would have thought it was this year.
Yeah,
so I'm
bet.
just shocked that they have absolutely no one. I'm slightly disappointed, actually.
I do feel, because I'm on their distribution and mailing list, that it's really sounds to me like some of their verbiage and some of their rhetoric is personal rather than conceptual.
Right. And I think
But they pick on you. How's that make you feel?
They do pick on me. At the end of the day, I think that you do need some sort of voice of opposition, even within the party. I wouldn't want to just see that voice silenced. But at the same time, I think that trying to keep things from being personal would probably do them well. I think that's why they're losing a lot of support.
And, here's in actual fact, we talked to a lot of Democrats. Not everybody loves each other and hugs each other in that party, but ideologically they have a lot of agreement. It is said here that since statehood, we have had this overwhelming majority of Democrat voters, and it's really pretty easy to find out why. There was a time that a very few people ruled Hawaii, and there was a lot of opposition, and it turned into unions, and unions turned into mostly Democrat-run organizations. And so to this day, we're still under that. Do you think, have you met a lot of Democrats that they're Democrats because, well, my parents are, I just did what, they told me to do.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think people don't necessarily agree with the current party's ideals either. They keep voting that way because Republicans haven't given them a good alternative, really. I think that's on us as Republicans sometimes.
Here's a chance. I'm getting email, but we don't accept email. When we're doing something that even smacks a little bit about being political, we want to make sure that everything's over and above the board. You can't even ask Rafi off the air for something. But if you want to talk to Beth Fukumoto Chang, or talk about what's going on in the session and maybe some bills that you like to know more about and maybe how Beth stands on them personally and how the Republican caucus may vote on them, it's easy. 296-KHNR or 296-5467. Okay? No email. We'll get to the email later in the program. If that's the case, there are any number of things that we can have bipartisan agreement on where it gets that way. And there are some that are being discussed right now that are pretty important. Would you agree? And that
yes.
There is a way to work together?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that I've noticed this particular year is that we just have had a lot less caucus no votes, where the whole caucus votes no on something. We did have one bill to raise the theft threshold to $750 from $350, and we all voted no on that. But other than that, I think we've had some very different ideas, and I think that's a good thing for the party because it shows diversity, but it also shows a willingness on our caucus's part to work with Democrats.
On that subject, I'll change things just a little bit here. because everybody knows that one of the big issues has been in on the Big Island, Hawaii County, the what apparently is improper, performance or improper behavior by the mayor, and there's a lot of concern brought up about these P cards, and people in the state or the counties being able to do this kind of a thing. Will there be, do you think, attention called to that whole issue as a result of what's going on the Big Island?
Yeah, I think people are at least more aware of it. We in the state, unless you're from a neighbor island, don't get a P card, so we don't have that same vulnerability, if you will. Everything that we do,
or maybe also temptation.
Yeah,
I mean, sorry about that.
No, you're right.
I mean, obviously,
you're right.
it is a temptation, right?
Yeah. And you can see where that can go wrong really quickly. It makes it easier to spend the money. You think about it last. And in our case, you still have to pay for it with your personal money, and then you get reimbursed by the state.
Now, let's say that you, Beth Fukumoto, has reason to entertain somebody for something in your area,
right?
And you use your MasterCard.
Yes.
So then, would you submit that and say that this, I think, is a legitimate expense?
Right.
Here's what I did, and here's why.
Yes.
And can that sometimes be refused?
Yes, and they've refused it on me and said, I need more details. Who were you meeting with? Or what was it for? And it's helpful. Yeah.
There is no question that it happens in the reverse. I want to talk about something more important, and that is how Beth Fukumoto's office and others in the minority caucus deal with lobbyists, because there's a strong lobby contention here, and there's a lot of us that feel sometimes legislators only hear from the lobbyists. They don't hear enough from us.
Right. And
they're paid to come and see you, right?
Absolutely, yes. Well,
so you know where they're coming from.
Not all of them. Most of them are paid to come and see us. And we know where they're coming from. They come in and at best they come in and they help you understand the bill a little bit better because they have a better, more specific knowledge about what you're dealing with. So lobbyists can be very helpful. On the flip side, yes, you have a powerful group of a few people that control how legislators think about legislation, which is concerning.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because I'm thinking that when you go on to some of the sites now, and particularly I like the way the Star Advertiser is doing it, when they show a bill, pros and cons.
Right.
You still have to consider where the pro voice and where the con voice is coming from, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So that means that lobbyists know that you know that they know that you know. In other words, they come in there, they already know. Beth, I'm here for the so-and-so guys. And you say, okay, what do you got?
Right. And on a good day, they do come in to talk to you. If they think your mind's already made up, it doesn't matter what they say, they're not going to come talk to you.
Gotcha.
So sometimes it's helpful to have them. It's helpful to get that perspective. I think on the topic of ethics, I think the flip side of that is that one of the things that we have a problem with, I think, at the legislature is people twisting basically campaign donations with lobbyists, having lobbyists come in and people indicating that, well, we want your money for my fundraiser that's coming up.
Gotcha.
And using their state property for those reasons. And that's harder to catch.
What about if somebody comes in and says, hey, Beth, I donated to your campaign. I mean, we believe in you.
Right.
So now here's our issue.
Right. Which I've been there before.
Oh, yeah.
And I've had that.
I'm saying that happens to everybody.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the ethic, as far as ethics is concerned, the key is to not accept money or solicit money from my perspective. So if somebody comes in and says that to me, I'll say, I understand that, I've had your support. However, this is why I feel this way about this bill. And, and at best you can explain it well.
I must tell you, I hate quoting from the ridiculous and the sublime, but my wife and I are kind of addicted to Madam Secretary and to the Good Wife on Sundays.
Yep.
And they're going through the exact, in this Floric campaign, she is going through the same thing where these guys, bad guys, are coming in and saying, hey, I put $1 million into your campaign. This is what you're going to do for me.
Right.
Do we need campaign contribution reform in Hawaii? It's a small place. Do we need it?
I think I want to say no. I think people need to just be more aware. We actually have decent campaign finance laws that say, I can look up and see this person votes a certain way, and here's where all this money came from.
Right.
I can see
Do the
that
math.
already, right? Yeah. It's just a matter of people not paying enough attention. I think that's where we need to start, and then maybe campaign finance reform down the line. But right now, we actually have a lot of transparency. It's just that people aren't paying attention.
Beth for Rep campaign. Okay, I contribute. I do my donation thing, whatever. But there's also now this huge, injection of cash into elections by these PACs and super PACs that I know they've always been around, but I can't remember ever there being as strong and as big as they are now.
Agreed. And I think, making sure we've worked in the legislature on making sure that super PACs have to release their donors, their top donors. I think that's all really important. At a state house level, it's not as big of a deal because we don't have super PACs really playing too much into house races. But one of the things that I'd like to see is the legislature require people to disclose before they vote on something where their campaigns.
That's really important. When you take a look at in retrospect, our last election. I'm talking about the senatorial office, the governor's office. When you see all of these ads and you think, wow, man, people are really upset. What you're saying is that sometimes the main contributor to one of those PACs is either they have a more direct line into the candidate's office than would be apparent.
Yes. Yeah. And I think disclosing all of that would be useful. Even on like I said, even on a state house level, the city and county, if you're voting on something, you have to disclose, I also got X number of dollars from
I think that's important.
HGEA, right? But at a state house level, we don't do that. And I think that would be an important place to start with reform.
Okay, we got more coming up, including your opportunity to join the conversation. Representative Beth Fukumoto is in the House. And speaking about the House, she's a representative in her district for the local House, and we'll talk about what they're up to and some of the important things on the table, and more important, what sort of yin and yang there are for all of these votes that are coming up, and most of them have to do with our wallets. Here comes Chaz on time with our 7:30 report again. Hey, Chaz.
Mike Buck on AM 690. The Answer.
Okay, so the vote's not in yet, but it's about to be on a number of bills that affect us. A lot of things to do with the appropriation and maybe then the release of money. Beth Fukumoto is here, and one thing that I'd like to maybe explain is there is a system of checks and balances in that at the city-county level, the mayor and the council, and this is all over the state, there's 9 council members and there's a mayor, and they have yin and yang.
Right.
In the state level, there's the administration and the House and the Senate.
Yep.
There are any number of people that don't understand on sort of what it takes to really vet this stuff out. And when it's about money, let's say that you sponsor a bill and it goes through. That does not mean that the money is going to get released right away sometimes.
Right.
How does it work? Is it in the bill when the money's supposed to get released? Is that voted on, or just the concept of what the money's going to go to voted on? Or both?
There's supposed to be an effective date where the law goes into effect. Now, if there's no money, sometimes the law can't go into effect, and that's where the governor has a little bit more control because he gets to decide whether or not he releases the money. And we see this. So one of the things people are talking about with Jeb Bush, right, in Florida, is that he was actually quite good at line item vetoes, where he was able to go into a certain bill, or whether it be the budget or something else, and just say, I'm deleting this line. Fine, you can pass your bill, but no money. And it's a way that the governor can save money. Governor Lingle did it too. Whether or not Governor Ige will do that is going to be.
I can tell you that in the media, when we get all of these barrages of, they call them news releases, but they're really PR pieces. Right. And the governor releases, or the governor, starts the fund.
Right.
Sometimes it can be either almost political. I mean, the governor can take a bow for what somebody else did.
Oh, absolutely.
And if he doesn't like somebody or something, he can hold it up.
Right.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially if you're one of these organizations. So let's talk about that, because I do know that right now the budget's the key.
Right.
And just because it's in there does not mean somebody's going to get a check.
Right.
What happens to my nonprofit after you pass $1 million to my nonprofit? I'm still waiting in line for the governor's largesse, right?
Right. And you're hoping, from a legislator's perspective, especially a minority legislator's perspective, I actually hope that the governor's veto power, or power not to release funds at least, is utilized to make sure that whatever we're spending on is not just a legislative favor, it's actually warranted. And sometimes I feel like with some of these nonprofits, with some of the capital improvements that we make into districts, they're not meant to be anything but to help boost somebody's reelection or
Sure.
to do a favor for somebody. And I think as the governor, you have to have a more statewide perspective and hopefully release things as needed.
What I think is cool is that every now and again, one of those is something that was in the governor's budget to begin with, because we know that the governor's budget has been pared down,
Right.
especially by the House this year.
Right.
But that means that everything else on there, you would think he'd want to spend the money and take the credit for. But if there's not enough beans in the bucket, how do they do that?
Right. And I think Governor Ige may be quite good at this. He did run a business, and we'll see what happens. Yeah.
There are any number of concerns. I do a program on Saturdays that repeats on Sundays with a company called Revolution, and they have a slogan called Smarter Living. There is a huge and tremendous concern, and I know this comes up to the state level, to ask the utilities on all the islands to make it more possible for more people to connect to alternative energy. Doesn't that fit in with the message about cleaner living that we are mandated to do?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think at least the PUC has seemed to move something along at least a little bit, right? It's not perfect, and I know a lot of the companies are still frustrated. At least more people are starting to get hooked up to the grid, but I think that it's been moving so slowly, and the PUC has just been moving incredibly slowly, and it frustrates everyone at the legislature.
Well, what about the other side of the coin, Beth? And that is, that being set aside, first of all, I do know that Next Energy and Hawaiian Electric have released information recently that some of the earlier conservative ways to maintain the strength of the grid and not allow too much coming back were in error. That they're in actual fact, the system can take a lot more going in the other direction during the day than it can. So that's a good thing.
Right.
But I do know that there's any number of concerned homeowners, and I'm one of them, that doesn't want to see tax incentives go away. And some of these things keep coming up. And as it looks like right now, some of the ones that are sunsetting aren't going to come back.
Right.
How are people going to be rewarded for doing what the state's trying to do?
I think what's hard is that my personal feeling is that the state did too much too fast with tax credits. Actually, I think we should have spread it out, made it less, but spread it out longer. Just because people rushed to get their stuff on the grid, it caused all of this holdup, and some people decided, all right, you know what, I'm just going to wait a little while till the PUC and HECO work this out. And those people that decided to wait are now getting stuck with no tax credits. I would like to have seen it spread out a little bit better.
One thing that came in on the Revolution show was that there should be something by the legislature that says, okay, if a homeowner comes up with the desire to do this and to be part of this based on the incentive,
right,
and that if their permit is delayed, and that sometimes between the day they file for the permit and the day they get it, the incentive was removed, we have to do something about that.
Yeah.
I mean, because wouldn't it be financially not possible for some of these families to hook up if it weren't for the credit?
Absolutely. And I think one of the biggest issues that we've seen is people being worried about that situation and going ahead with their system anyway. And they're just paying that off now, and it's still not hooked up, so they're not getting energy savings, and it's this whole long issue. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I like some of these companies say, look, we'll just get you in line. No money. You're not going to be out of pocket until we start getting up on your roof.
Right.
That makes to me an incredible amount of sense for people that are out there, because they always have the power of no when their permit comes through. Right? They can say, you know what, things came up. I had a death in the family, divorce. We're selling our house. We're moving. We don't want this anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. What are some of the other things connected with a desire? I do know that at the county level, they're looking at building codes and maybe relaxing them. Does the state have a position, or is there any legislation about multi-generational living or exceptions being made in what at the county level were restrictions?
I don't think the state is really pushing anything this year. I think we try to leave zoning up to the county. One of the things I think to watch for the county is to see, since we're talking about solar, whether or not things like solar and that sort of thing start getting calculated into your property, your assessed value for your property.
Yeah, of course.
Because they're hurting for money, right? So at some point that could happen at the county level.
Okay, by the way, Beth Fukumoto is here, and also coming up right after our time this morning, a new segment that we're doing with the prosecutor's office, Scott Spallina. who is an attorney at the prosecutor's office, is sort of heading up the elder abuse unit. And I do know that there's constant concern about that at the ledge. Are there some bills that are designed to take advantage, not take advantage, but call attention, mostly through campaigns, to warn our seniors about things like identity theft?
Yeah, we always have funding that goes towards programs that will do that, exactly that. It's particularly senior education, or fall prevention. That's another one that we often do for elder issues. Yeah.
I got one concern before we go to break, and that is, as you know, the food bank had a very successful drive and got to their million meal, level. It came out that there are something like 276,000 people somehow getting food that goes through the food bank. Doesn't that send a huge signal to the legislature that, hey, this homelessness problem is huge, but families' inability to feed each other is also huge?
Yeah.
And I know that there are some things that are designed to have the counties and the state work a little bit better on that issue, particularly about homelessness. What's still alive?
Every year we look into more money for Housing First. That should be still alive at this point. I think that has been the most proven of a program, and getting more money towards that, as well as making sure that our public housing system is up and running properly. So there are bills to make sure that we get enough money towards the Rental Housing Assistance Fund and that sort of thing.
I would be pleased if somebody that's directly involved in either getting something or lacking to get something from that would join the conversation. Because I think that one of the things that happens is after Beth leaves every week, there are any number of people that say, hey, wait a minute, I got to go online and figure out more how to do that. We'll tell you how to do that right after we tell you how to get to work. Here's Malin Moore with traffic. It is 7:45.
This is Mike Buck on AM 690, The Answer.
Well, short of replaying once again, like I've done many times this year, how does a bill become a law? There is any number of measures that are up for consideration between now and the end of this session. And just before the break, Beth Fukumoto was here, and just before the break, Rep. Fukumoto and I were talking about the importance of the pro and the con. In other words, if there's a bill, in order for you to give input or post your comments to your representative, your senator, your councilman, your mayor, whatever, you need to get qualified, good information. It's pretty hard to do sometimes, Beth. I mean, there's a lot of people saying, hey, the media is kind of controlled. They got one side of the story.
Sure.
What do you suggest to people that say that? I don't know what I like about this. Where can I find out more?
Well, the legislature's website, capital.hawaii.gov, does put everything up online. So it's granted they could get things up faster, but at the very least you can look through the bills yourself and you can look through the testimony. So what people actually said instead of waiting for what was reported, particularly with TV news, I think sometimes you get only bits and pieces of what somebody said.
You bet.
If you can read their testimony directly on the Capitol website, that helps a lot too.
Now, a lot of people say, I don't have time for that. If it's a meaningful bill, you'll make time.
Right. If it really matters that much, then
but
you should
see,
look it up.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing that I agree with. I get probably every day about 15 or 20 invitations from different members in government to go look at the YouTube this and the YouTube that.
Right.
And I don't know if like 11 people do that or not. I mean, it's just like, especially if there's a 50-minute thing.
Yeah, agreed.
And you have no idea where somebody's thing is going to come up.
Yeah. Yeah. Anytime, I think anything that's longer than 2 minutes really on YouTube is basically useless. So it
that's
makes
because
it difficult.
we've become imbibed with that, right?
Yes.
Give me a soundbite. I'm out of here.
Right. But I think, what I often tell people is if it's going to be worth your time to complain about, then it should be worth your time to actually look up the information about. Because the time that it takes sometimes to send a really long, angry email is the time that it would have taken you to just
watch
look it
the
up.
whole thing.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing that any number of people's minds would change.
Yeah.
They would change a little bit. They'd say,
Right.
by golly, I was wrong. I got the information. But once again, it qualifies the information. So even though you're in the minority party, do you feel that going to that website is giving you some adequate, the other side of the story?
Yes, I think so. I think it's helpful because at least you get to see the source material. They teach you that in school, right? Always go to the source material.
Right. Or like they
So your
say as an
primary
accountant,
source.
follow the money, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right. And if you can look that up on the internet and read it yourself, then that helps get a clearer picture.
I'm wondering how dismayed or how dispassionate people have been coming when they take a look at things like the rail project's additional funding and
Sure.
going on with that. I do know that there are many people in state government that didn't think it should be open-endedly extended.
Right.
There should have been a time on it. What was the compromise? Where does it sit right now?
We're waiting in conference. There is no compromise yet. I think that both the House and the Senate have said they don't want to see it permanently extended, so I don't think we're looking at a permanent extension. But I think that it really depends on the community. I think if you saw what happened at Washington Middle School when they had a rail town hall, there
Yep.
were tons of angry people
Lots
that
of
came
angry
out.
people, sure.
Lauren Matsumoto and I had a town hall in Mililani. The same town hall, we had 15 people,
Yep.
and I would say probably 5 of which were pro rail. And I think when people are angry, they come out, but if they're not angry, they're not going to come out.
Yeah.
And 15 people to me was okay. Most of my district has probably accepted this as something that's going to happen.
Yeah, and that does make sense.
Yeah.
What about the other side of the coin? When you go to like a neighborhood board meeting or something,
Right.
rather than a talk story, and you see this overwhelming number of people wearing T-shirts and
Yeah.
and asking you to sign up for the being against this when you walk in the door.
Right, which I also has not really happened too much at my neighborhood board, so it's hard to
Yeah.
say. Maybe we're just more peaceful out in Mililani.
Okay, by the way, if you are on the phone right now trying to get through to us and talk to Beth, and some of you are, please be patient and just let the phone ring. Raphael had to go down to let another one of our guests in, so he's not in the control room right now. I see the lines blinking, and we'll get at him as quickly as possible. In the meantime, one of the things that I want to do about this tax thing is I hear the word 2027. Is it all
Right.
about the rail projects being able to borrow against that money? Is that why
Yes.
they need it extended?
Yes, that's why they need the extension. Everybody. So Ronald Reagan, Eisenhower, were all Republicans who paid a good attention to capital improvement projects, and I think that's how I view the rail as a capital improvement project. And it doesn't make sense to pay cash for something like that the whole time, right?
Okay, let's go to the telephones. I got a regular constituent talking. We talked about this before a little bit. Don in Kaneohe has got a concern, and even though he's not in your district, he has a question that is, I think, island and statewide. Don, good morning. Welcome to the program. Don, hello there.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, Don. Don, go ahead.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I have
Morning.
a question about House Bill 1272 for a descriptive movie for the blind and for the deaf. How is that going through the legislation?
Okay. What bill is that again, Don?
1272, HB 1272.
HB
You
1272.
know what? I'm gonna have to look it up. I know we saw it last time. I'm not sure what happened in the Senate though.
But that's okay. She has a device with her. She'll let you know on that. What does that pertain to, in your opinion, Don?
Well, we have people that, I think one of the representatives has a son that is deaf, and there's no closed caption on the screen.
Yes.
So he wanted to be able to go to any movie theater that had 2 or more theaters to be able to go there and watch the movie and know what's going on. And the blind have headphones that we wear, and we can hear the description of what's going on, like a man running, shooting the gun or whatever. So it's very easier for us to understand what's going on in the movie than just going there and having somebody tell us what's going on and disturbing the movie.
Right. So it looks like it's going to be in conference. So it did pass out of the Senate. It's going to be in conference, which means that for the next 2 weeks, there will be random sort of conference committees held to discuss the changes between the House and the Senate, and whether or not if they can agree on changes, and both the House chair and the Senate chair can agree to pass out the same bill, then that we would be able to pass it within probably about 2.5 weeks.
I think it's a good bill there.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, Don, thanks very much for your call. Now, isn't this a good example of a bill that really doesn't have to do with D or R next to your name?
Sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
it either makes sense or it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And there's been support from both sides.
Yeah,
for it.
but just out of curiosity, I'm trying for the life of me to think, and maybe I'm naive. What would be opposition? I mean, what would there cost? Would there be cost involved that people wouldn't like to absorb, or what would be any opposition?
There
to
was
that?
opposition from movie theater owners who felt as though who said that there's not always a descriptive text available,
Okay.
so that closed captioning could be, but descriptive text, which is what was one of the primary things that was needed, is not always provided, especially for independent films. So that was one of the problems. So I would say that we might be making some sort of an exemption for that in conference.
You know what I think is interesting? When I was a kid, a couple of my Japanese friends would drag me to the samurai movies, okay? I'm a kid. I have no clue. I learned later on, how to get by in Japanese, but I had no clue, and I used to love the subtitles.
Right.
And when you finally get to a point where you don't need to watch the subtitles because you kind of get it,
Right.
You feel pretty good. But I do know that some people feel distracted,
Yes.
and so they want it to be an option. But a visual is a lot harder to make an option, isn't it? I mean,
In a
with the
theater,
headset,
yeah.
it's easy.
The headset would
Yeah,
be easier.
yeah,
Yeah.
Wow, it's sort of so that would be one of then you would expect that opposition would be people saying, look, it would be financially hard for us to comply with this.
Right. And that was the bulk of the opposition. That it was financially difficult, or if somebody showed a lot of independent films, it was impossible for some of them.
What about some of the things that are going around, environmental things that are still around? I do know that counties and areas are operating on ban the plastic bag and do this. And there's a lot of people that say, wait a minute, why don't we just make some of this stuff statewide?
Right.
And there are a few bills that are would trump the county, right?
Yes, there have been. And I don't think we voted on one this year, like an all-out ban. That would be what would trump the county. Alternatively, I know every year we talk about perhaps doing a 5-cent tax on plastic bags. If people want to use them, they have to pay 5 cents each bag.
And then we could figure out to make the 5 cents work for us. Okay.
Right.
As I try to do before the end of our session, each week during the session, is have a Beth Fukumoto Chang moment. Okay. What's your favorite thing this week? What are you looking at?
Conference committees are always a very exciting time for me. I think this is one of those moments that, as a member of the public, it can be frustrating because you don't have an opportunity to testify. But if you are interested in a bill, all the conferees, usually about 5 members from the House and 3 from the Senate, are getting named to each bill. So if you're interested in a bill, then the thing to do would be to look up who's on conference and to talk to those people
there you
directly
go.
for changes, because there is no public testimony. But it's always an exciting time to see the House and the Senate and the different opinions.
I know that a lot of times earlier in the session, people in the House or people in the Senate, we've done our thing, it's the Senate or it's the House.
Right.
This is where the rubber meets the road, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's always exciting to see 2 different chairs with 2 different visions sort of need to negotiate it out to try to get the best piece of legislation.
Okay, next week we'll talk about what happened in conference committee this week.
Thank you.
Okay.